Thank you very much for joining today. And so I'm Patricia Brekke, as Holly said. I'm a research fellow here at ZSL. I've worked here for quite a number of years, since 2009, and I'm an academic. So I do mostly research in conservation biology and wildlife health. And I wanted to give you kind of a brief synopsis of how I got here. So my career path has been quite windy, not as straightforward. I did A-levels in biology, chemistry, and Spanish. Then I went on to do an undergraduate degree in zoology at the University of Sheffield, which was really wonderful, and three really key 3 years in my life. After my undergraduate degree, I worked as a research assistant for 2 years in one of the labs of the professors at the zoology department at the University of Sheffield, because I couldn't really afford to do a master's. So that was a really great way of getting direct research experience without having kind of to invest a lot of money in kind of having a master's. And at that time, you could go into a PhD studentship without having to have kind of both degrees. I did that for 2 years. Then I wanted to gain some more field skills, and I wanted to focus on birds specifically. So I volunteered for 6 months in Canada to monitor the migration of birds from South America to North America. And I did that. So I learned lots of bird handling skills, mist netting, how to understand differences in morphology between individuals and lots of different species, how to ring birds, how to take samples as well, and how to preserve samples. So it gave me a really nice kind of rounded set of skills in the lab during my research assistant years and in the field. And that kind of pathway allowed me to then start applying for PhD studentships. But obviously after volunteering for that long, I didn't have any money. So I had to work alongside that. And I worked in market research for about a year. But that also gave me a really good understanding of why I wanted to kind of go into academia and what kind of skill sets might be important if I wanted to come out of academia again. So every step of the way, I kind of learned skills and kind of helped me hone in on kind of the area I wanted to focus on. So I applied for PhD studentships during this year, and I got accepted to in a studentship at Imperial College London, where I did my PhD, and that took 3.5 years, and it was focused on developing kind of genomic and genetic skills on a threatened New Zealand bird called the Jeha. And it was a wonderful 3-year experience, 3.5-year experience. Again, I did lots of field work, about 6 months every year. I spent in New Zealand on an island, tracking Jeha and getting samples for my PhD studentship. And after my studentship, I, graduated and got a doctorate. And I was hired as a postdoc for 2 years, which means kind of doing research for someone else in someone else's lab, which was my supervisor for my PhD. So he hired me for 2 years after that. And then after the 2 years of postdoc, I then went back into a more technical position. I did lots of short-term contracts for a while I kind of applied for fellowships. And research fellowships basically allow you to develop your own research and focus on the questions that you're interested in. So that's kind of why I wanted to go in that way. And I was really lucky that I got an AXA research fellowship, and that gave me funding for 2 years to do my own research. And I focused that research on the species that I had worked on and in my PhD, which is the Jeha, and it allowed me to develop a long-term data set and build pedigrees for that species, which then gave me kind of a baseline to launch my career. After that 2 years of fellowship, ZSL gave me an in-house fellowship, which is called the ZSL Fellowship, and I started my own family as well. So I was juggling kind of doing research and developing my career and trying those first kind of steps into developing my own team, and also having children, which was really quite tough, but also really rewarding. And having children helped me in many ways kind of be more focused and more practical, and kind of make sure that I made the most out of the time I had. And I started to build my own group, so have my own students, have my own PhD students, have my own master students, which is really rewarding because I really enjoy supervising and teaching. And then I can't see the rest of my slide. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Then I was given a permanent position at the Institute of Zoology, where I'm now a researcher and fully funded researcher. And I had another child during that time as well. And that brings us to today, when I am a fully fledged research fellow with a permanent position at the Institute. And I'm a principal investigator for all the research I do. And I have a team of master's students, PhD students, and postdocs that I collaborate with and that I work with. And my research is very varied. So from day to day, which is one of the really nice things about being an academic. Not one day is the same. And it varies between kind of doing research, which is what you'd expect. So you're either doing field work or lab work, or do data collection or analysis, writing scientific articles or grants to get more money to do more research, develop seminars and talks like this one, or science talks, and kind of developing new collaborations with other scientists, with other NGOs, or, different kind of institutions, kind of thinking. I spend a long time thinking, and that's probably sounds really silly, but it's a really important part of the kind of work I do, generating new ideas to do research. Research is actually quite creative, which is something that I really like about doing the work I do, and keeping up with new developments in the field. I also do a lot of teaching and supervising. I supervise PhD students, as I said before, and master students. I develop new PhD projects. I do talks and teaching to undergraduates and master students. I do a lot of education and outreach, which means going into schools or doing talks like this one. And I develop teaching tools for either kind of other academics or for people kind of in early career stages. I also do new teaching material, coordinate teaching, and do a lot of science communication as well. And finally, I also do things that are more pastoral or admin, so a lot of mentoring and career development of others that are earlier in the career stage. I do a lot of pastoral work. So, for example, I was the postgraduate tutor for a number of years, which meant that I kind of dealt with all the issues that arise for PhD students during their kind of PhD. I did a lot of project coordination, team coordination, grant coordination, collaborations between different teams across the world. It requires a lot of coordination, time. Sending and receiving emails, developing licenses, or getting licenses and permits for the different work that we do in the field and in the lab, developing contracts for people that I hire for my team, and also kind of developing new collaborations and sharing the information that we gather is really part of my work, of my day-to-day work. And, it varies a lot between, all of these three kind of areas. And currently my research is focused in three different kind of themes. So the first theme is trying to understand the impact of urbanization on wildlife health. So as you know, kind of urban areas are expanding globally, and they're kind of encroaching on areas that are really biodiverse. So we really need to understand kind of how the urbanization impacts that wildlife, not only in terms of removing the habitat, which is really important, but also other anthropogenic factors like pollution, for example, air pollution that we're all experiencing. And I kind of became interested in that topic because I lived in London and I was experiencing that as an individual, the air pollution that we all breathe. And I wanted to know what the impact of that was, not only on humans, but also on the wildlife that share kind of urban habitats. I also work in a kind of parallel area, trying to understand the impact of human interventions and conservation interventions on reproductive health and fertility of wild birds, particularly threatened birds. So as threatened birds become extinct or kind of as the populations decline, they suffer from much higher rates of infertility and reproductive failure. So I wanted to understand how the things that we implement, like captive breeding, kind of supplementary feeding, have an impact on these kind of really vital aspects of the long-term survival, particularly in females, because we don't have a lot of information in that area. And finally, I also try to understand the impact of these kind of conservation interventions on the genomic health of threatened birds. So as population decline, the kind of genomic health of those populations also decline, and we do interventions like reintroductions, which have an impact in that genomic health because we put them through genetic bottlenecks. So trying to understand how we can kind of balance those interventions with maintaining some of that genomic health in those populations is another kind of key area of research at mine. And so just kind of going quickly through all of those kind of projects, they keep me really busy and really stimulated. I'm really kind of excited about developing new work and new collaborations with others to try and make a difference and have an impact in the world. And it's what keeps me going in this kind of career path. So what I wish I knew when I was at your stage. So the things that have kept me in this academic career is kind of being relatively kind of focused and wanted to remain in academia, and being curious and enthusiastic about the work I do has been a really kind of key aspect of it. Also being able to take failure and turn it into a positive. So failure has actually been a really important aspect of my career development. And when I failed, I've actually learned a lot more than when I've succeeded. So I think that failure has been really, really important. And I kind of have to embrace it in the end. And it's been, it's been good. And also I've realized that perfection doesn't exist, and striving for perfection has never been something that's been healthy for either my career or for my mental health. So I try to not focus on that too much. I also found that I needed to learn about what made me happy and what made me work at my best. So, how do I create a work environment, a culture within my work environment that kind of helps me maintain a healthy work-life balance and maintains me motivated? What do I need to make me happy to maintain that kind of high level that I need to be at to be an academic? I also found it really important to develop my own networks and to collaborate with people that I get on with really well, that have a similar focus and a similar way of working. I'm a really collaborative person, and I really enjoy working with people who are really collaborative. And that seems to work really well in conservation because there's lots of different stakeholders. And so that's been a real positive for me, working with really nice kind of dynamic people. And also kind of learning to be kind to yourself again when those failures do occur, and in science they occur quite often, and to be kind to others. And that kind of makes a working environment that's healthy and happy, and that makes others thrive as well, not just yourself. Also to take advantage of all the resources that come towards you at all different stages. So when you are an undergraduate or at A-level, also take advantage of all the different opportunities that you might have. That was also really important. And to reach out to others when you have any issues, make sure that you connect and that you ask questions and that you ask for help when you need it. Don't kind of stay quiet and try and solve everything yourself, because others have been there before you and will likely have some tips for you to be able to follow. And maintain a balance between the work that you do and how important it is, and the life that you have outside work as well. And that's it from me, I hope.
So my name's Sam. I'm a sustainable business specialist here at ZSL. And my main focus is with these things. So tropical forests, really, really important for life on our planet, home to lots of different plants, animals, fungi, etc. But also they're really important in our fight against human-caused climate change. All these trees, all the plant life here absorbs a lot of CO2. So it's really important for us as humans to keep these ecosystems standing. But they are under threat. So 90% of all deforestation is caused by agriculture. And one of the big culprits is this. So this is a natural rubber plantation. So you can see the farmer here is scoring along the side of the tree, and the tree exudes latex. This gets collected, and then it gets turned into products that we all know. So things like tires, medical gloves, even perhaps the sole of the shoes that you're wearing. So it's a really important material. But unfortunately, these farmers don't get paid a lot. In fact, most of them actually live in poverty. And when they're in poverty, they might try and get more money by chopping down a little bit more forest, planting more rubber trees, thinking that if they are able to extract more rubber, they can sell it and hopefully they'll be able to get a living income. But it doesn't really work like that in most cases. And in fact, if we sort of zoom out a little bit and stop looking at the farmers themselves as the main culprits of deforestation, what we're really going to see is that business is behind this. So if business was able to pay the farmer here a fair wage for the amount of work that they're doing, then perhaps they wouldn't feel forced to deforest and go into the neighboring habitats to try and earn more money. So that's basically my job. I talk to businesses, and what we try and do is change the plantation here in the middle, which is, as you can see, rows and rows of rubber. There's not much else in terms of life here. It's quite brown instead of nice and green and lush. And that's probably because a lot of pesticides are sprayed on this farm. So what we try and do is engage businesses to transform farms like the one in the middle to something that looks a little bit more like this one on the right. So it's still got those rubber trees, but you might be able to spot that there's a palm tree there as well. There's different fruit trees. You might have things like chickens or cows that are also on that same plot of land. And what this does is it increases the diversity of what's actually on that plot of land. So more animals can live there, but also it increases the profitability of this farm. So this is an agroforestry model. They're able to sell fruit. They're able to sell the animal produce as well, and tap rubber. So hopefully this lifts the farmer out of poverty. And the main people that are able to do that are the businesses. They're the ones with the resources to be able to invest in these farmers. So one of the main misconceptions about my job is that working with businesses is ultimately, ultimately going to be a bad thing. So a lot of people's reactions to bad business is to boycott it. And that's a completely legitimate reaction. We've seen it with palm oil, for example, really big campaigns to boycott palm oil because it also is a big driver of deforestation. And it's been linked to the plight of orangutans in Southeast Asia. And that can be effective. But a lot of the time, the business, for example, that's selling palm oil, they're just going to shift to a different buyer. So they might have been selling to the UK, for example, but then the UK decides to boycott that palm oil. They're just going to sell to another country instead. Could be in Europe, but it could also be big markets like China, who doesn't necessarily have the same sustainability credentials, or they don't care about sustainability as much as different markets. So here at ZSL, what we think our role is we've got a lot of expertise in-house. We do a lot of biodiversity monitoring. We do a lot of working with business. We can address the skills gap in businesses. They don't know how to monitor biodiversity. We can tell them how to. Then they are able to go to these farms. They're able to improve the biodiversity on these farms. They're able to hopefully create a more equitable supply chain where the farmer is getting more money for the goods that they're supplying. And we see this as one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So you've got things like boycotts and campaigns against bad practices and companies. Then also you can work with them and you can address their skills gaps and you can try and make them and push them towards a more sustainable pathway. So that's what we try and do here at ZSL. But how did I get into this job? So this is my career path. I started off doing probably what a lot of people are talking about today, and I started doing science. So I did double science at GCSEs. However, my grades weren't good enough to do biology at A level. So my school said I should do psychology instead. And this really reduced the amount of things that I could do at university when I wanted to go. I really wanted to do zoology, but no one would take psychology as that science. So instead I did animal behavior at Exeter University, had a really amazing time, got some really good field experience as well as lab work as well. And off the back of that, I got an internship, and this was fully funded by the EU. And I'm really sorry that probably isn't around anymore as an opportunity for someone in the UK. But I was able to sit on a boat every day and observe whale and dolphins in their natural habitat in Tenerife. And it was a really, really good experience that I did for a few months. Then I came back and I actually became a presenter here at ZSL and started talking to the public. And then off of the back of that, got a job as an education officer at a different zoo. And I really enjoyed talking to the public and kind of raising awareness of different conservation issues. But I thought, hang on, whenever I look up a species or I look up a habitat and I look up their main threats, a lot of it can be linked back to business and business practices. So I went back to university to learn a little bit more about agriculture and about climate change analyst and then as a specialist. If I'm being true though, this is a bit more of my career path. So I worked at kids' summer camps. I also worked in retail at Mankind. I've made pizza. I've done handing out leaflets when I was at university. And even after I did my master's, I went to work at Sainsbury's for a bit because I had to pay the bills. There was no way of doing it. I was trying to interview and get a job in conservation. But sometimes these things take a little bit of time. And also I've done, they're just a few examples of volunteering. But I've also done lots of different volunteer work as well, but nothing for an extended period where I wasn't getting any money just because I basically wasn't able to afford it. So my career tip is that you might not realize it, but every job or volunteering opportunity that you have is probably actually feeding into that end goal, into that dream job or that goal. Because I wouldn't have got my first job here at ZSL if I hadn't worked in retail or making pizzas and doing things like that, because I really honed in some customer service experience and I was able to talk to lots of different people. And that's actually what got me my job here, talking to the public. It wasn't my degree, that definitely helped. But a lot of the people in the team that I was working in didn't have degrees. They didn't have backgrounds in animal care or any sort of wildlife monitoring, anything like that. They all had the same experience, which was customer service. And that was what got me my first job in a conservation linked organization and not my degree. So I think it's really important to remember that no matter what stage of your career you are, every experience can be transferred into your next step, your next job. And that's it for me. There's just a nice few pictures of me in different stages of my career so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. That was really great. And there's some really great advice on there as well. So hi, everybody. My name is Elle, and I'm a current PhD student based here at Zoological Society London and also at UCL. It was really nice to see the Mentimeter that you guys did before the start of this session and see a lot of love for frogs. Give me a cheer if you love frogs. Woo! Yes. So I'm an amphibian person. I work predominantly on amphibians. I kind of describe myself usually as a sex scientist because I'm really interested in how animals reproduce, how they choose their mates, and everything kind of related to that. So at the moment, I'm currently working on 2 different species. So we have a really cute picture just there. So that's actually not a frog, that is a newt. So that is an alpine newt. They're an invasive species in the UK, but they're really, really good for testing hypotheses about sexual selection. And you can see that they're really brightly colored and everything, so they make a really good species for looking at their evolution. I'm also looking at the moment at the Mallorcan midwife toad, which is a species of conservation concern. It's currently quite threatened in its natural habitat. So I'm currently looking at their behaviors as well to try and look at indicators of welfare. We currently know very little about welfare in this species, and how behaviors can kind of indicate whether welfare is good or poor in certain individuals. And a lot of their conservation is currently occurring ex situ, so it occurs in zoos, places like London Zoo, and so it's really important that we know how to captively manage this species, and welfare obviously plays a really huge part of that, and ensuring that we can get good results from our captive population, that they survive, they reproduce, they're happy and they're healthy. So that's my current role. Just like Patricia was saying earlier, in kind of academia, you can have a really varied kind of work style. So my job includes some field work, so going out into the field and observing animals in the natural environment, bringing them back to the lab. I also do lots of recording of behaviors in the lab, in this building. All of my frogs and my newts live upstairs, and they've been on the roof for quite a long time, and they've been in some funky places. I also do quite a lot of desk-based stuff, so I do a lot of analysis of that data. I do a lot of writing up my results, reading other people's work. and I occasionally do talks, but not very often because often I don't have such a lovely audience that like frogs as much, and I avoid those experiences like the plague. So it's very rare that you guys have me here today. So this isn't loading. There we go. So I was asked to talk a little bit about my career path to date. There's some cute photos on there for you as well. You're welcome. I don't really like the kind of term career path because to me that kind of suggests one straight linear route that you take to get to the position that you're currently in. And as Sam showed us earlier, that's not the case. You tend to do kind of multiple jobs potentially at the same time, and the things that overlap, and not all of them are not all of them seem like they're kind of adding to get you to your goal. But as Sam says, every single experience definitely counts towards getting you to where you want to be. So as you can see, no like cool tropical experience on here, no whales and dolphins, haven't worked on turtles in the Caribbean, nothing like that. As you can probably tell from the northern accent that I'm completely unable to hide. I'm from a working class and quite low income background. I've often had to work multiple jobs at once, not always been relevant. Some of the more relevant ones that produce cool photos though, because nobody wants to see photos of me working as a waitress. You can see the cute little bird over on the right-hand side, left-hand side for you guys. That was my first ever job in conservation, if you like, looking at, that's a dipper. They live in riverine regions in the UK. So I spent a long time in the Lake District, working out how those guys' population and community work. I also spent a very long time working with hedgehogs and holding that stupid antenna of my head. So I would tag hedgehogs with GPS tags so that we could work out their movements and how they were interacting with roads and road tunnels in the UK, something that we've been really, really bad at implementing, but are hoping to do more of in the future, seeing how effective the ones that we currently have are. I also kind of sold my soul and worked in ecology for a while. So there's me in beautiful orange, the best color. It suits everybody. So yeah, I did lots of surveys on lots of different projects, bat surveys, dormouse surveys, reptile surveys. Happy to answer any questions about those later on. And then also I've worked for some big kind of engineering projects, such as the kind of HS2, which I won't talk too much about, and also the smart motorway development of the M1. Not exactly kind of jobs that you think of somebody who is an ecologist working in, but actually you really need ecologists on site in those jobs to make sure that things are being done properly and that animals are not being harmed by those projects. So even though, you know, it's not maybe a career that you want to go into, it's something that lots of people do in ecology, is go and work on big engineering projects like that. So I wanted to kind of highlight those as well. And then this is me with my friend Pixie the fox, who is at a little wildlife center that I volunteered at too. So yeah, as you can see, this slide, I mean, it's a mess by design. And that is because I haven't really had a career path. I've just had like a whole kind of sprawling layout of several paths that I've tried to straddle at once, as have many of us in this industry. So if the slide looks like a mess, it's because my career has also been a bit of a mess. It's the truth. So my top tips about getting into this sector are to be really active in seeking out opportunities. I personally wouldn't actually be stood talking to you today if I hadn't done this many months ago. I sent an email around my organization saying I would really love the opportunity to speak to people who would like to get into this sector. I would love to be able to speak to more people who want to do this. And as a result, they contacted me when this came up. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have. Nobody knows who I am because I spend all my time in the lab and in the field. And so they probably would never have contacted me. So be really active in telling people what you love to do, what you would love to do, and you'd be amazed what kind of opportunities would come out of that. Equally, I would say get your foot on the ladder. I think often the hardest job to get in this sector is your first job. I know I really struggled at the start, feeling like I didn't have the qualifications I needed. I didn't have any experience. And I think a lot of people kind of go through that feeling of how on earth do I get started? But equally, my first job came from finding somebody that had the job that I wanted. and saying, do you know of any opportunities, like any kind of work opportunities, volunteering opportunities for me to get involved with? This person went away, did their research, came back to me and said, no, I couldn't find anything. But because I was a young, enthusiastic person who really wanted to get into the same field that they were passionate about, they made a job for me on their own project. So you never know what's going to come just from actively seeking out opportunities like that. And getting your first job will then act as a springboard to every other job that you apply for. It's amazing just having one experience on your CV, even if it doesn't look relevant to you. Somebody else will see some kind of positivity in that and something that you can bring to their team. Equally, don't select yourself out of an opportunity. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've written a job application, I've edited the job application, I've spent a lot of time on it, and then I haven't sent it. Because at some point during that process, I've thought to myself, I'm not good enough. I don't have the qualifications that I need. I don't have what they're looking for. And as I've got older, I've realized that what I should have done is left that job to the person that is paid to do it. So I don't, you can never guess exactly what a person or a company is looking for a particular position, for a particular person in their company. And it might be that you think, oh, well, I'm not good enough for that. So I'm not going to apply for that. But actually, they're looking for somebody just like you. And you can never be the judge of that. Only they can. So don't do the job that you're not paid for. Also, I would say, obviously, really, really important to invest in your own mental health. Something that I've neglected until quite recently is investing time in my hobbies. So as you can see on the slide, well, if you can see on the slide, I'm really into archery and I'm really into travel and doing kind of extreme sports. I really like scuba diving and skydiving and caving and all that really crazy stuff. And it's something that I have totally neglected until quite recently. And you don't need money for a lot of these hobbies. I mean, you do for travel, obviously, but there are so many things that you can get involved with, and particularly if you're at a university, will be going to university, make the most of societies and clubs and things in your local area. It's really, really important to have something outside of your work that you love to do. And it's never too late to take up something new either. So I've very, very recently, like in the last 2 weeks, taken up digital illustration. So that's the first thing I've ever digitally illustrated. Thank you. It's a frog. So yeah, make sure you're doing something outside of your own work. I mean, that is the species that I work on. So like, that's not the best example. But if you can find something that ties together everything that you're interested in, then do. And it's not too late to take up something new and do something that you want to get better at and improve in outside of your professional career, because it's really, really important to do something and have something about you other than your work. And finally, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like I said before, there is so much value in finding the person or the people that do what you would like to do, like find the people that you aspire to be like and ask them for help. I think the greatest thing about leaving school, and there are lots of great things about leaving school, but I think one of the greatest things about leaving school is it gives you the opportunity for the first time to choose your teachers. So you can choose the people that you want to learn from, that you want to mentor you. And you can seek those people out. I mean, the fact that we have email today means you can get in touch with literally anyone at any time, which is fantastic for you guys, because you can just find that person who is doing what you really love to do, and you can ask them, how did you get there and what should I be doing? And I think that is kind of the opportunity that you should be jumping on the most, is to seek out those people and get them to help you to where you would like to be. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. And here's some contact details, and I'll hand over to Lena.
Hello everyone, I'm Lena Jeha. I work in conservation and practice. I'm a monitoring, evaluation and learning technical specialist. Most people don't like me because I'm trying to sort of gather information on projects and talk about impact. So I'm going to tell you about my crazy story, becoming a conservation scientist. I've worked a lot on tigers. I saw tigers listed a lot. It wasn't intentional, but because everybody loves tigers, a lot of my work has been involved with tigers. I've lived in Sumatra, Indonesia. I've been to Nepal and seen tigers. So yeah, that's really cool thing. So that's me. So basically, I'm going to tell you, so my career kind of merges some of the other people we've heard to today. So I'm an academic and I'm a practitioner. So I call myself an interdisciplinary conservation scientist. What does that mean? I'll explain to you like what my job's about. I think I don't have much more new things to say than from what our other speakers are, but basically one of the key things is that if you want to work in conservation, practical field work is really important. Volunteering is really important. So these are the different things I've done. So when I was at university, I led a conservation society. Sounds very glamorous. Basically, it was removing rhododendron and chopping invasive species down. But I've also done lots of field work in, my PhD was in Uganda, and I also did field work in Canada, tracking caribous, trying to work out what had killed these caribous. So flying around in helicopters, trying to work out what was going on. So what has been my career path? I made mine linear, although I have to say it wasn't linear, because if you look at the dates, you will see there are gaps. And that's because it's really difficult to work in conservation. It's never linear, but yeah, I have presented it in that way. So basically, I am originally Middle Eastern. I was born in a desert in Saudi Arabia. And I can tell you something about my culture. They do not understand wildlife. They do not care about wildlife. And my culture is a little bit like, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, you're a little bit of a failure. So my family were not best pleased when I was like, I love rainforests. And I, like Sam, love rainforests. I have absolutely no idea. But I remember being bored out of my mind in a geography class and then seeing this tertiary consuming spider. So it was a spider that ate a bird. And I was like, what? I want to go to this place. And I'm not joking you. I obsessed with this. So I was about 14 years old. And from that point, I was like, I want to work in forest conservation or wildlife conservation. And I'm going to make this my dream. And I didn't come from a family that supported that. I didn't come from a family that were like, you can go off and do things like gap years. Did I listen to my family? No, I did not. I worked in a supermarket for 2 years, saved all my money and fundraised and lived in Guyana, which is a country sort of in between Venezuela and Brazil. And most people forget about it. It's one of the only English-speaking countries in South America. So I went to the rainforest to learn about indigenous peoples and live in a rainforest because that was my dream. Then I didn't really understand a lot about ecology and wildlife. So I did a more general degree. So I did environmental sciences. Probably on reflection, I probably wouldn't have selected that. I would have done zoology because I just like the biodiversity stuff. So a lot of environmental sciences was like going to a wastewater management facility and lots of very, very boring things. And I was like, I just want to look at wildlife. What is this? I got involved. So I think one of the really key things is I was really interested, and this is really key to getting to becoming a male technical specialist. I was really interested in blending academia and practice together. So I made sure that I was doing a lot of things that sort of merged the two together. So I was getting field experience. So I did things like mapping York's favorite green spaces. This was all volunteer. At the time, I don't know if this project still exists, there was a sort of program on sort of, what was this? It's called Citizen Science. So I was like going into schools and engaging with young people, trying to get them to like identify different species and stuff. It was done by the museum, Natural History Museum, right? So lots of fun things like that. So I made sure I did a lot of those things. I then got awarded what's called a 3+1. So I got a fully funded master's. Again, I think that doesn't exist anymore. Was really, really lucky. And then got on the ESRC. So then they funded my PhD. So all of that was funded. And I went directly from undergraduate into PhD. So I finished my PhD at 26, which is crazy when I think about it now. So yeah, my PhD, I was really interested in equity and justice and conservation. So in the conservation field, building off some of the things that Sam said, we're trying to conserve wildlife species. And we go into places where we don't really know a lot about these people. We don't really understand their cultures. And we're kind of telling them to change how they live their life. So don't chop down this tree. Don't use this natural resource. But actually, we don't have a lot of evidence of what works. Like when we put up a fence, does that really stop human-wildlife conflict? When we tell people to change their behaviors, does it actually have an impact? And actually, a lot of what we do in CNP, they're probably not going to like me saying this, we don't actually have a lot of concrete evidence that what we're doing is actually having an impact on protecting biodiversity and helping people. So I really made the focus of my PhD for like practical outcomes, knowing that I wanted to work in the practical field of conservation. So from that point, I made my whole sort of career dedicated towards monitoring and evaluation, because what monitoring and evaluation is about is collecting information on the things that we do to try and assess whether we're kind of reaching the outcomes that we want to. So after my PhD, I couldn't find a job. So here I am, I'm 26 years old. I've done my PhD, I've lived in Uganda, I've learned languages, I've done tons of volunteering, and I couldn't find a job. And I knew I didn't want to work in academia. At this point, I was like, I don't want to see another paper ever again in my life. Die. So I was like, oh, conservationist. So, but I couldn't find a job. And actually, I spent a year looking for a job, working in a supermarket, working as a waitress. And then I decided, right, I've got to work in monitoring and evaluation in another sector, get those skills, and then go back into conservation. And the first job I applied for outside of conservation after a year of rejections, let me tell you, I was applying for basic level conservation jobs with a PhD and tons of experience leading conservation, writing about it, and getting rejections. I mean, it absolutely destroyed me. So I can tell you that. So then I applied for this job, got this job, improved my monitoring and evaluation skills. I worked in educational outreach, again, all feeding into the things that I love about equity, justice, getting disadvantaged young people into higher education. I then actually strengthened my MEL skills because they're way more advanced. And the first job I applied to in monitoring and evaluation in the conservation sector, I then got that job straight away. So my plan worked. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, feeding off all these other talks, it does sort of do this, but keep going and keep sticking at it. So then I got a job at Fauna and Flora. Have anyone ever heard of FFI? Woo! Okay, they've just changed their name. So I did a postdoc in Sumatra looking at tigers. Again, it was a 10-year project, and the donor wanted to know, are we conserving tiger numbers? That sounds like a really easy thing to do, but tigers hide under trees, and it's actually not that easy to count them. So, so my sort of role over there was bridging academia. I was still doing a postdoc, really quite complex methods, still working in research, but applying it to a conservation field. I then got a little bit disheartened. I can sit here and tell you the truth that, anyone who knows anything about conservation or is passionate about it, like I am, I was 14 years old, I rebelled against my family to pursue this career. If you're really passionate the way I am, it can be disheartening working in monitoring and evaluation, because the truth is we are losing our forests, our species are declining. And when your job is to kind of monitor that and track that, it can wear you down. So I definitely got wore down, especially because someone's in a project turning around saying, actually, this didn't really work. Okay, that is my job. And that's why a lot of people don't like me. Or don't want to engage with it. So in the conservation sector, a lot of people just sort of brush over it, say, we don't have any money for this. We don't know. But of course, how can we make our projects better if we're not monitoring them and we're not learning from them and we're not evaluating them? So that's what I do. I'm now working at in CMP as a technical specialist. I'm still involved very much in research. I'm co-leading a research group at Oxford University. I've done guest lecturers. I also act as an inline evaluator, so like an external person that comes in and evaluates projects. So I write big technical reports, as well as doing things like supporting field teams. So this is, I've spoke about all this stuff. So this was my master's and then my PhD. And so, yeah, my current job. So it's, as I said to you, it's interdisciplinary in that I look at social data, I look at biodiversity. It's also interdisciplinary in that we're mixing field work, so what our conservation field teams are doing, and bridging in that with academia. So things that I do in my job, I analyze data sets, I provide technical guidance if people are sort of planning their M&E, how do we collect this information? What is the right information to collect? I do a lot of skills development, so like training, things like how do we analyze data? How do we code? All this kind of stuff. I write reports. And so the main things with my work are sort of obviously providing technical support and championing adaptive management. So what adaptive management means is kind of what I've just been saying for the last 5 minutes in that. We should be learning from what we're seeing in our practice. So when we're implementing conservation projects, what do we learn and how do we adapt? So if a certain strategy isn't working and we've got evidence that it's not working, how do we adapt? And that's actually the key for why I do what I do. I want to make conservation better. So that's why evidence and working in academia and collecting data, although it can be quite time consuming and difficult, is really valuable for our projects, as much as it can seem quite far away from those people that are on the ground actually delivering the conservation projects. So what are my top tips? Knowledge is power. One of my favorite rappers, Nas, says, read more, learn more, change the globe. So please do that. I know it might seem boring. I'm collecting data, I'm reading papers, but you know, knowledge is power. So yeah, build up the relevant work experience. As all of these guest speakers have said today, you know, just go and try different things. Give up your time, volunteer in a project, do all kinds of things and get yourself out there. One of the biggest mistakes I made with my PhD was not networking and I just sort of went into the field, did my research, wrote my papers. I didn't speak to anyone. I was quite young, and that's why I probably didn't get a job in conservation afterwards. If I had made my research directly sort of linking to a project, I probably would have been more able to sort of move from academia into conservation. So do think about what you want to do. Also, a lot of people, the final sort of thing I'm going to say is, a lot of people come to me, I get a lot of people asking me about careers, and they're sort of like, I want to work in conservation. What do you do? What's your skill? Are you a fundraiser? Because that's really key. Are you a social media person? Because that's really key. Are you a report? And they're like, no, do everything. Try and specialize in something. And it doesn't have to be biodiversity. It can be social media. Taking all these technical things that I write and making them accessible is an invaluable skill. So yeah, try and specialize in something, because that's really going to help you. Okay, and passion and perseverance. Woohoo!
The top question at the moment is, what is your favorite thing that you do in conservation?
Straight away. I think one of the really good things, just generally about working in conservation and specifically here at London Zoo, is that on my lunch break, I could go and look at 2 baby gorillas. Really, really like that. It's very different to your typical office job. But I think what it is kind of going back to what Lena was saying for her job, is trying to see an impact. And I think making, if you're able to, through your work, have a tangible change and see, in my examples of a company actually changing their policies, changing their procedures, and moving towards something that is more sustainable than it was before. I think that's really, really rewarding. And it's not necessarily just like a kind of tick box exercise where I've managed to achieve this during my year here in my job. Instead, it's actually, I'm trying to think of impacts that have kind of impacts on people and wildlife around the world. It's not just the immediate thing that's sitting in front of my screen. It's actually having implications for people and wildlife in other areas too.
Yeah. So you like monitoring and evaluation? You are basically monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah, we'll try and.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for me, obviously, I think Sam, you've just mentioned the key reason why I do my job. I like that it's different every single day. I think, was it you that said that? Yeah, someone mentioned that here. I never have the same 2 challenges going on. Every time I'm presented with something different, I don't think it's ever mundane, because there's so many projects in conservation. You know, there's lots of different species, lots of different ecosystems, lots of different types of projects, and so it never gets boring.
Cool. Yeah, I think my favorite thing is just that I'm finding out new stuff that nobody has ever known before. So I was like one of those annoying children at school who would just collect random information, not the information I needed for my GCSEs or for my A levels. I would be the one that would come up to you and be like, do you know a mountain chicken is not a chicken? It's a frog. So and you know, I would love collecting random information like that that have no use in life, but now I'm the person that is finding out this information. I'm finding out things that people don't know already. And I really love that I'm not just kind of, I'm obviously taking on information from other people and what other people have learned all the time, but then I'm also contributing something myself to the field. So something that nobody has ever known before. And to me, that's really, really exciting. Also, I get to work with frogs, so there's that.
I'm just wondering if we can get Patricia back up on the screen, Marianne, to hear from her as well at this point. I don't know whether any of you have an answer to this one. Someone has asked, how achievable is a PhD? And I suppose a kind of question would be, do you think a PhD is necessary to access the conservation sector? And if so, kind of how achievable is it, and what are the best ways to kind of get there?
Oh, should I answer? Who wants to talk about this? I have to say, looking back at having done a PhD, I might not have done one, because I do feel like they are quite intense. And it's not that people who do PhDs work any harder or any more intelligent. Sorry. I think it's just the fact that you have to look at the same thing for 4 years or 3 years. And by the end of it, you're like, I'm going to murder someone. So I think it's just that like focus and dedication. But I think in terms of conservation, I'm not quite sure I needed a PhD to do the job that I'm doing now. I do love bridging academia and practice, but I would say unless you really, really, really want to become an academic, maybe not. But that's just me.
Yeah, I would largely agree. If you want to go into academia and you want to research for a living, then absolutely. It's like probably the best way, well, definitely the best way to get there, because you're getting a degree through doing that process. So that is going to make you, you know, a far better hire than somebody that hasn't done a PhD. But equally, I know people that have gone into conservation and don't have a PhD. I know plenty of people who've gone into conservation who don't even have a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree. There are other routes in. A lot of the kind of volunteering and work experience that you saw on our slides, they're all things that could definitely get you there. One of the ladies that I worked on the hedgehog project with went straight from that to working with meerkats in Africa. She's been there for 3 years now, and is well established there and is actually leading a team. She's never done a master's degree. She's never done a PhD. So it definitely isn't an absolutely necessary thing to have in order to go into conservation. But I would say if you want to go into research, then absolutely.
Have we got Patricia back, maybe? Aha, Patricia, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I I think absolutely you don't have to have a PhD to go into conservation. I would say that a PhD gives you a lot of skills that would really help to develop your conservation career. And so I think it doesn't hurt to have a PhD and makes you more competitive, especially when you're applying for jobs with such a large number of applicants. So distinguishing between people, if you have a PhD, it really helps kind of maybe stand out from the rest, I would say. I mean, obviously I'm an academic, so I have less experience than the guys kind of at the front here in that area, because they're more kind of applied conservation. But I think in terms of developing your skills, it's really useful. In terms of applying for jobs, it's useful. And in terms of kind of also when you have a PhD, you're more likely to access higher paid jobs than when you don't. So I know you can do conservation without one, but I don't think you get to have the high paid jobs without one, I would say. But maybe I am wrong in that. I'm happy to be proved otherwise. So just my thoughts on that.
Nice. Sam, did you want to add anything, or should we move to another?
Yeah, quickly, if that's okay. I think it's quite easy from the outside to look in and go, oh, I need to be super qualified. I need to have a master's and a PhD. I need to go to uni first place. But like's already been said, you can get in other routes. And I think there's more being done now to try and diversify the sector than before, because it has recently been identified that we are one of the least diverse sectors in the UK in terms of people from different backgrounds. So conservation has become quite an exclusive area to work in. And I think hopefully more apprenticeships, more internships that are paid are going to be coming out over the next few years, because I think, especially when we were starting out, a lot of it was volunteer work that you had to do for months and months on end, and you wouldn't get any money. So the only way you could do that was working in a supermarket or having a job and saving up for 2 years before you could get 3 months worth of experience in a different country or something like that. I think it is changing. I think you can get more internships now that are based in the UK. You don't have to move to a tropical country and able to get experience, and hopefully it's going to keep getting better. I guess the proof will be in the pudding. Like, we'll see what it's like in the next few years.
Thanks very much.
I can't believe you've forgotten the statistic. It's the second whitest sector after farming in the UK, which is why I was like talking about my Middle Easternness. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We've had a few questions. We'll finish up on this one because we're behind schedule again, but that's fine. There's lots of questions around like how to start if you're looking for a research project to get involved with, maybe some of the native species work that you were talking about, Elle, kind of any sort of top tips on where to look for this stuff, how to kind of move forwards when looking for practical experience or getting involved.
Yeah, so it can be really difficult, especially, I mean, it depends on kind of where you're based as well, as to how easy it is to access these things. So if you're at a university, or if you're thinking to go into university, then definitely kind of take advantage of the people that you have there, because you're surrounded by experts in the field that you want to work in. So ask around. But equally, I think, apart from my first ever job, all of the other jobs that I've had, I've just found through the internet. So I would say the best thing that you can kind of do today, if you were going to do one thing today, even kind of sat in this room in a break or something, is make yourself like a professional social media profile. Like, get yourself on LinkedIn, get yourself on Twitter, and just kind of put yourself out there. As you can say what your interests are, any experience that you do have, though you don't have to have any, and connect with people that are already doing the jobs that you want to do. And that's something that you can do from your sofa. You can do it from bed if you like. Just make yourself a profile and get out there, because I think all of my jobs have been found through LinkedIn. And personally, and there are many other platforms available, but certainly that is probably your greatest resource, because it doesn't matter where you're based, you can find somebody advertising something that you can be interested in on platforms such as that. So that would be my advice.
Nice. Does anyone else have any other burning first steps they want to advise?
networking, I think, has been a theme as well throughout everything that all of us have said. And it's really a struggle sometimes to do that. I know that I hate going up to people and just kind of explaining who I am on a one-on-one basis. And it feels like you're trying to get something out of them. But everyone here in this room wants to have a career in conservation. And I've learned a lot about different jobs just by connecting with those people on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever it is, and following their career over time and seeing where they've gone and where they've been. So we've got, you know, over 100 people here today. If you are able to connect with a few people on a LinkedIn profile or whatever, you can follow their career and you might say, oh, that person's gone on to do this in an organization that I've never heard of before, in something that sounds really, really cool. Maybe that's something I should consider. And it kind of opens your horizon up a little bit and opens you up to new opportunities that way.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you very much to the speakers. As with our previous sections, any questions that there were that we haven't managed to answer, I might be putting together an email to send out to you all, just to kind of get some additional responses to share with these guys. But thank you very much. And we will we'll let you free again now. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So just before we head off for another little break, we've got just 3 things that we wanted to give you a quick introduction to. It'll be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of other useful things for you to know about. And the first one's just going to be Lyndsey, who's going to come and talk to you about ZSL Fellowship.
Hello, everyone. I promise to make this nice and quick. So who in this room has heard of Fellowship? Oh, that's very good. I was like, I've got some fellows in the audience today, so I expected them to put their hand up. So hello. So yeah, I'm here today to talk to you about the lovely Fellowship. And I also chose a frog because the reptile and amphibian house is opening next month, which is really exciting. So yes, I'm here to talk to you about Fellowship. Does anyone actually know what Fellowship is? You can put your hands up. Oh, even my fellows didn't put their hands up. That's worrying. Lovely. So I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour. And first of all, I'm going to show you some images on the screen, and you need to guess what the connection is. It's a bit of a trick question. I've already mentioned it, so you should be able to guess. Yep, we've got some frogs on here. Does anyone want to guess what the link is? It's a trick question. I'm talking to you about it now. Fellowship. Yes, thank you so much, Holly. Yes, so we're talking to you today about Fellowship, and Fellowship links all these things on the screen, believe it or not. Tutankhamun was discovered by a fellow back in the 1920s, and the Beatles used to come because their producer was a fellow of ZSL. He used to bring the Beatles in, so a Beatle would be looking at Beatles. It's one of my favorite facts. The Okapi was announced to European audiences by a fellow, and we've had some really cool people over time. So the top left is the real OG. His name is Sir David Attenborough, for those of you who don't know. And he's actually one of my current fellows. So we have got some really cool people on here. And what is Fellowship? I hear you say. If it works. Thank you so much, Adam. I love it. This is great, audience participation. So what is Fellowship? So Fellowship was started in 1826, and it's our scientific and academic membership to ZSL. And it was started by the gentleman in the middle on the left, Sir Stamford Raffles. He decided he wanted to have a living collection, and ZSL was created. In fact, it's the oldest scientific zoo in the entire world, thanks to Sir Stamford Raffles. And he actually allowed women to be part of the Fellowship from the start. So we were actually one of the first societies to do that, which is fantastic. And we've had some really famous women over time. The lady in the middle, that is Joan Proctor. Anne may have mentioned her to you earlier. She was a very famous fellow and then became the first female curator of ZSL. So she has a soft spot in my heart because she created the old reptile house, which is now closed, sadly. But we've had some really cool stuff over time. But rather than me just sort of go on about Fellowship, I thought it'd be better if I just showed you a really nice video of some animals and explained what Fellowship was. So I'll do that for you rather than me talking. There would be some really inspirational music in the background if this was had sound, which does have a bit more of an impact. I'm not the best singer. So the little baby at the end, that is Nandi. She is now 3 years old at Whipsnade. She's the southern white rhino. She is incredibly big now. So if you do go to see her, she does not look like that anymore. So as you can tell, the video has slightly aged a bit. But as a fellow, what do you get and what does it mean for you? Oh, you don't want to watch that again. You get all of this. So fellowship is there to kind of be a helping hand as you start your early career. My sister knew from the age of about 3, and apologies to the fellows in here, I always say this. My sister knew from about the age of 3 that she was going to be a vet. That was her blinded vision, and she knew what she was going to do, but she didn't really have anywhere that she could connect with other students. So here we are. And in fact, some of my fellows are in this picture at the bottom. But we have a program where you can get involved and attend things. We did a veterinary networking event at Whipsnade last year. We had our student conference in October. You can come for unlimited visits, and it's really there to help and enhance what you're studying. We have our May conference where we've got lots of different things booked up, and we have some CPD hours, so professional development in April with interview techniques, presentation skills, and science communication. So there's lots for you to get involved in. You also get updates throughout the sector as well in the zoologist and some volunteering opportunities as well. I believe Anne mentioned to me earlier that some of you were interested about how to access the library. Fellows are officially the only ones who can borrow and access the library as part of your governance responsibilities. So you can actually come down and use the library as well. So this is here to help you, to give you the best chance. We do teach you how to plait fire hose, and that went up inside the lemurs a bit later on in the day. So there's lots of ways for you to connect. And if you join in the next couple of months, you actually get to come to the previews of our new reptile and monkey forest at Whipsnade. So yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Lyndsey. And then the last one before we head off for a quick break is Chris Yesson's just going to talk to you a little bit what something was mentioned briefly earlier, but there's a couple of MSCs that we co-host here at ZSL.
Thanks, Simon. Right, so I'm an academic here at the Institute of Zoology, like Patricia, and I am course director of 2 of the master's courses that we run here. So ZSL, we partner with universities. So we have partnership with University College London and with Royal Veterinary College. And these 2 masters, these are our web pages, called Wild Animal Biology and Wild Animal Health. And they're really oriented towards training conservation professionals in the idea of how do we monitor, investigate the health of animals of wild animals in captive and wild settings. And so these courses, the Wild Animal Health course has been running for 30 years now, which makes it one of the longest running conservation master's courses in the country. So lots of experience, lots of our graduates now teach on our master's courses as well. Patricia, you saw earlier, she teaches on this course. And that's specifically for vets who want to kind of delve into the kind of clinical aspects of diseases. But the Wild Animal Biology course, which has been running for a mere 20 years, is targeted at a more general conservation audience who want to know and understand better the impacts of diseases on conservation, on populations and wild animals. And so here are some pictures of our students doing some stuff on our courses. And so because we're at the zoo, we have a great opportunity to engage with our keepers and engage with our captive wild animals. We have our students do research projects looking at behaviors of captive animals and how we can then learn from that in wild settings. We also have a team of vets here, and so we have like in the top left there, that's Rob DeVille, and he's about to do an autopsy on a cetacean. So understanding the cause of death of this wild animal that's going to probably rocked up on a beach somewhere. Yeah. Oh, this one looks like a harbour porpoise, maybe. Yeah. That's the most common thing that gets washed up. But we also have kind of practicals where we go out to Whipsnade. So that picture on the bottom left, we have these, let's walk around and let's find these animals and then we try and understand what the cause of death of these animals are. Okay, and obviously because it's an academic course, we spend a lot of time sitting in lectures and learning from our conservation professionals that we have here at the zoo and our academics. Our students' research, we do research projects based on our network of conservation work all around the globe. So the bottom left is a map of the locations of where our students have done their projects in terms of the data that they've analysed. And we have, I don't know, half a dozen students publishing their research every year because of it. And here are some posters that are from last year's graduates. And one of the things that we're really proud of about these courses is what our graduates go on to do afterwards. And so a master's is a really intense year of learning and experiences, but our graduates go on to use that learning in their future professions. And so there's a kind of list, I don't know if you can read that, but people go on to work in conservation organizations, kind of things that you're interested in. So the head of Kenya Wildlife Service is one of our former graduates. Head of Mexico City Zoos is one of our former graduates. So it's a great stepping stone on a career towards being a conservation professional. I think that's it. Thanks.
Basically, I wanted to introduce you guys to the ZSL Youth Advisory Board. We have a Youth Advisory Board of 12 members who were formed in the summer of 2023. And they've put together this video to introduce who they are, what they do, and I wanted to show you a little bit of their success stories afterwards. If you're interested, we recruit the Youth Advisory Board every 2 years, so the next recruitment would be 2025, but they are looking to build a mailing list of kind of interested young people who would like to work with them to support the work that they are doing.
We are the Zoological Society of London's newly created Youth Advisory Board. We are a group of young individuals setting out to challenge the ZSL community with the youth perspective and to engage with other young people to inform, support and empower them in conservation. We would love to talk to you about why it is important to have youth involved in conservation and share some thoughts and ideas with you. Why is it important to engage youth in conservation?
I think it's important to engage youth in conservation because ultimately the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, all the losses to wildlife is something that impacts all of us, and it doesn't do it justice if only like a small group of people have a say in the conversation. So that's why empowering youth is so important.
I think it's important to involve the youth within any type of conversation because essentially we're the stewards of the future, and it's important to have those intergenerational conversations which may be difficult to have, but yeah, start those conversations from young and make them what they are.
It's super important to engage youth in conservation because we are the new generation. You know, you've got to start that education and awareness of what's happening to our world early on because we are going to be responsible for it in the future.
I think big problems like climate change and biodiversity loss warrant more diverse perspectives, so youth are critical to that, to solving the problem of climate change and conservation.
It is incredibly important to engage youth in conservation. They bring a new sense of fresh and ideas and creativeness that is not necessarily represented in other groups. I think the youth have such an amazing way to engage with social media, especially TikTok incredibly, of how to raise awareness and reach other platforms that many other groups are not able to.
I believe for a company or organisation to be truly diverse or inclusive, and if you truly want to hit all those target groups, then you need to engage with the youth.
So I think what a lot of people will focus on is the future of youth importance. But I also like to focus on the now because obviously a lot of things are happening now, a lot of different issues to do with the environment and the climate. So focusing on the now is one of my key phrases for youth engagement.
What does the Youth Board mean to you?
Expressing myself and speaking on behalf of my communities.
Empowerment.
Inclusion.
For me, the Youth Advisory Board means responsibility.
Empowerment, it's hearing young people and lifting their voices up.
Providing opportunity.
Growth and development.
Community and hope.
Discovery of everything.
It means working with like-minded people. Advocacy and awareness.
What are your hopes and aims for the board?
I really want to put accessibility at the heart of everything we do, because I think it's one of the more often overlooked elements of diversity and inclusion. So I want to make sure that absolutely everyone can access conservation, particularly any people within the young demographic who have any sorts of disabilities.
I think the number one is just upping youth engagement as a whole. I mean, that's why the Youth Advisory Board was created. Number two is education, not just for children, but also for adults who believe that the zoo means something other than what it does, which is conservation.
I truly hope that we can create an active youth-led movement across wildlife conservation spaces in the UK and internationally that ensures that young people are meaningfully engaging in wildlife conservation issues.
I really want to make sure that we set up the next kind of generation of youth advisors so that they are able to continue delivering important work across the zoo.
To break down some of the barriers that young people feel are stopping them from engaging with animals on an everyday basis.
Aims and hope of YAB is to build a global, diverse and inclusive community of young conservationists with the aim of saving the world.
They have been around for only about 7 months now, but they have achieved a huge amount and want to achieve more. So if you want to get involved, email youthboard@zsl.org.